The era of the shinobi has ended, and the world of the shinobi has been destroyed. Yeah, maybe that's a short but interesting topic for us to discuss in the next few minutes. But before that, I'm Nim without the E, so at least help me get this video to 100 likes or 1K hype points. And once again, thank you so much, guys. Regarding the shinobi world, no matter how it ends, at least lately, we've started to get some clues or hints that IKEMOTO has been giving us quietly and secretly, especially if you look at how the dialogue has been lately, which has been mostly focused on the Fire Nation issue, specifically Konoha itself, starting with the shinobi budget issue and some things pointing toward the potential ousting of Shikamaru. I think this is something we can predict how it will unfold in the future. What I mean is, seeing how IKEMOTO writes the scenarios unfolding in Konoha itself, there's a significant potential for the Konoha system itself to undergo a complete transformation. And again, regarding the shinobi budget and several matters related to the economy and such, I think IKEMOTO wants to involve several aspects of the problem, which will certainly make Boruto's story not only focus on the Shinju or the never-ending threat from the Otsutsuki clan and such. Instead, IKEMOTO wants to bring us to several topics or issues that have never been there before. As a Boruto fan, I really appreciate this. So yeah, connecting some things about the shinobi world, especially as I mentioned earlier, and regardless of how the shinobi era or the shinobi world ends, there are some things that might be relevant for us to discuss briefly. But, disclaimer guys, if any of the information I mention is incorrect, please correct me. But based on information from several sources and others, I'm sure it's not wrong. So yeah, I want to take you all back to one of the most underrated clues that has been around since the Next Generation era, and his name is Tento. In short, Tento is the son of the daimyo, ruler/feudal lord of the Land of Fire, the country where Konoha is located. And if you look at this old man who in chapter 16 orders the Konoha elders to capture Boruto alive or dead, he is Tento's father. As for Tento himself, he is basically a prince or heir to the throne. Additionally, he first appeared in Boruto manga chapters 11 to 13 and was adapted in anime episodes around 148 to 151. So basically, this character is fully canon and not filler. He's not a random or anime-only character. Yeah, that's how it is. And speaking of his appearance, at that time, Tento was still very young with a pompadour hairstyle. Yeah, you know what I mean. Basically, his hair is very similar to his father's. And in terms of character, he is really like a child who has so many privileges. With a super spoiled and entitled personality, he has an obsession with the game cards Extreme Shinobi Picture Scrolls, a kind of collectible ninja card. And what I find really interesting is that IKEMOTO wrote Tento's character to represent a rich kid in the real world. Tento has a mindset where all problems are solved with money. Yep, his father's money. And of course, if we compare him to Boruto himself, there are so many similarities. Although not entirely, at least Tento and Boruto are both children who have full privileges. And because Tento's father is a high-ranking government official with a busy schedule, he often doesn't come home, and Tento is sometimes left with the servants and given expensive gifts to make up for his father's lack of attention. But of course, the fact cannot be denied that Tento seems lonely and needs validation from his father, and that's very similar to Boruto. Oh yeah. Fast forward to the beginning of the story, Tento came to Konoha after being kidnapped by bandits. But of course, in this case, Boruto managed to save him. Not only that, Boruto also taught him the basics of shuriken jutsu, how to throw accurately, and other things. Boruto gives a life lesson. Even though training doesn't always succeed, hard work will yield results that money can't buy. Boruto even gives the training shuriken as a good luck charm and also as a keepsake. And in my opinion, the interesting part of how IKEMOTO writes Tento's story is when he asks a question that I think Boruto himself is facing the same problem. I don't know what words to use to describe this, but at least Tento, with all the privileges he has, doesn't get his father's full attention. And because of that, he asks Boruto about it. In short, he wants to become a shinobi to get his father's attention. And as I said earlier, in this case, Tento and Boruto both have the same problem. Then, maybe after this, you will ask what the point and meaning of all this is, right? But if you look at how IKEMOTO writes Boruto's story, I think he will become an important character. For example, in the current story, To Blue Vortex, Tento hasn't appeared yet. But based on various theories and assumptions from many fans, at least these 4 points will answer everything in the end, especially when the conflict becomes much more complex and involves the daimyo and his son. Because, once again, first, Tento is the son of a daimyo. And believe it or not, the majority would agree. Whether in the real world or fiction, even if not 100%, at least almost 100% of the children of those in power, such as daimyo, will inherit the throne to their sons as potential successors, right? Second, regardless of the omnipotence manipulation that occurred throughout the shinobi world, which reversed between Kawaki and Boruto, at least Tento has a personal connection with Boruto, positive memories, and some objects or things like shuriken. Third, this may be similar to the second point. I mean, we don't really know how omnipotence actually works. In other words, I know that when omnipotence is activated, we see how the earth seems to have been manipulated due to the massive effect. Is that correct? But again, is there a difference between people in Konoha and those outside Konoha? I know this might sound silly, but what if there's a loophole we don't know about for everyone outside Konoha? Especially for some people who don't have a very close bond with Boruto himself. And if that's the case, then Tento's memories shouldn't be absolute without any gaps in remembering who Boruto really is. And the important point is, if points 1 to 3 become a reality, especially when Konoha's politics are unstable, the shinobi budget issue, pressure on Shikamaru from the daimyo chamberlain, and several cases involving threats to the shinobi world, Tento could be the key to defending the shinobi era from the top level, even Boruto himself. Who knows, right? The point is, Tento is an underrated canon side character, a representation of the new generation that connects the shinobi world with the political civil world. And I admit that in this case, Tento is not a shinobi with superior fighting abilities or anything like that, but at least Tento has great potential through his connections and status. Yeah, that's how it is. And as a final conclusion, especially regarding the ultimate outcome of the shinobi world itself, what truly ends may not be the shinobi, nor ninjutsu, let alone the will of fire. What collapses is the old system that has long made shinobi mere tools of the state. The shinobi world didn't collapse because it lost a war, but because it lost its legitimacy. When shinobi began to be questioned in terms of budget, efficiency, and politics, it meant that they were no longer seen as the main pillar of the state, but as a negotiable burden. I know this might sound complicated or something, because when I wrote and looked for ideas about the end of the shinobi world from various perspectives, rather than focusing on the destruction of Konoha that we saw at the beginning of the Boruto story, I think this perspective is quite relevant if the future timeline is not absolutely linear, based on what has already happened. And once again, what I have explained is representative, or perhaps more accurately, another perspective on the destruction of the shinobi world itself. Yeah, I'm sure you understand what I mean. And that means, at that point, Boruto's conflict shifts direction from merely fighting the Shinju or the Otsutsuki to a battle to preserve the very meaning of the shinobi world itself. Konoha is not on the brink of destruction because of external enemies, but because of cracks from within. And in my personal opinion, at this point, the role of characters like Tento makes sense. Not as a fighter, but as a symbol. A bridge between the shinobi world and the political world. If the shinobi world still has a future, it won't be because of who is the strongest, but because of who still believes that shinobi are worthy of existing. And perhaps the greatest irony is, when we say the shinobi era has ended, what we are actually witnessing is not death, but a phase of selection. Will the shinobi world evolve and find its place in the new system, or will it truly vanish, swallowed by politics, economics, and civilian power? Or perhaps it will return to what we saw at the beginning of the story, destruction. But once again, this is all based on the perspective of a Boruto addict. If you see a probability or something similar to represent the end of the shinobi world, and not just based on the destruction we've already seen, let's talk about it in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you'll help me push it to 100 likes. Thank you for watching. I'm Nim. See you in the next video. Bye-bye. Data bio.